Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 5 ways to embrace self-nurturing in the new year masterclass. Most likely, you're here because, like myself and many other women in my Aspire magazine community, you struggle with putting yourself on the top of your to-do list, or even anywhere on your to-do list. Or maybe you've broken through that block, but still struggle with the weight of the guilt for doing so. Believe me, I get it. For many years, too many to count actually, I struggled with creating the time to nurture myself. There was always something more important than me, whether it was getting the laundry done, the dishes done, helping a friend, growing my business. I always seemed to, and I put this in parentheses, run out of time. Does this sound familiar? Well, for me, about 4 years ago, everything changed. I met an extraordinary woman, a woman who changed how I look at self-care, as well as my feelings, beliefs, and self-sabotaging habits around that same topic. And I began turning to her wisdom, her blog, conversations with her, to tap into her expertise and learn strategies. And since that time, she's become a soul sister, one of Aspire Magazine's expert columnists, and I gotta say, I am so excited to have her here with me today. Joining me is the one and only Kelley Grimes, self-nurturing expert and just all-around extraordinary woman. Allow me to introduce her, and then we're gonna dive into the topic of today's call and masterclass. Kelley is a counselor, speaker, international best-selling author, Aspire Magazine expert columnist, and a sought-after self-nurturing expert and keynote speaker. She's the founder of cultivatingpeaceandjoy.com and the co-creator of the Cultivating Peace and Joy mobile app. And as you're about to discover, Kelley is passionate about empowering overwhelmed and exhausted individuals to live with more peace, joy, and meaning through the practice of self-nurturing. In addition, Kelley provides professional and leadership development to organizations dedicated to making the world a better place, and teaches self-nurturing to women overcoming domestic violence, homelessness, and other major life challenges at a local nonprofit. You're about to discover Kelley is committed to nurturing peace in the world from the inside out. Welcome, my beautiful friend.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you, Linda, talking about the thing that I feel is the most transformative commitment that we can make to ourselves, which is to nurture ourselves. And I wanted to just be clear up front with what our intentions are in teaching today so that we're all on the same page. We intend to teach how to be kinder and more compassionate to yourself and why you deserve it, how to recognize the emotional signs and physical symptoms that you need to nurture yourself. That's so key. How to nurture yourself, actually giving yourself permission to love and nurture yourself without feeling guilty or selfish. That's huge. To identify the benefits of nurturing yourself in every aspect of your life. And then I want to provide 3 easy to implement strategies so that everybody can take something from this masterclass and put it into action right away.
Well, I'm excited to dive in, and as I always ask, I invite you to give yourself this time that you set aside for this masterclass. Take a moment, make sure all your browser windows are shut off, all your Facebook notifications, and of course, silence your phone. This is a part of self-nurturing, honoring yourself and being fully present in your own life. So if you could take a moment to do that, we will dive in.
And I actually want to invite people to just take a moment to breathe. So much of the time we're rushing from one activity to the next. And I think a deeply self-nurturing practice is just to pause, feel our feet on the ground, and take a moment to breathe and connect with our body and our breath. Our body is such an important messenger to us. So just pausing for a moment to do that can be deeply nurturing. And I'm going to invite us throughout the masterclass to pause and reflect on what we've taught and see how it's meaningful. because that's how it's really going to have an impact in others' lives.
Thank you for that. I want to do that right now. So one of the things that I've found in all the conversations, right, Kelley, is women are always at the bottom of their to-do list. And we're going to talk about more of that in a moment. And if you signed up and you are here with us for this masterclass, there's a reason. And for me, one of the signs that I now recognize, but I didn't for many years, is I was always overwhelmed and exhausted. Raise your hand if that's something that's constantly feeling that way for you. And for me, I was always caught in the cycle of self-neglect. And what that looked like is not exercising, not eating right, jeepers, and never even drinking enough water in the day. It just became layers upon layers because it was a story I was telling myself that, well, let me take care of everyone and everything else before I take care of myself.
Yeah, absolutely. As if there's ever a time when all of that is complete and we have time for ourselves.
It became like a hamster wheel because it was never complete, right? Because it's impossible. Life is always happening. And as we're going to be talking about today, we have to take care of ourselves first. And I'm fully transparent with my audience. I still struggle with this, Kelley. And you've walked me through so many processes to help remind me exactly as we're sharing in this slide that you cannot pour from an empty cup. We cannot fulfill our purpose and our passion in this world if we're exhausted. We can't love and support our friends and families if we're exhausted, resentful, etc.
Well, and the thing is, you're so right, Linda, because the fact is that we have had reminders, say anytime that we've flown, we have these reminders that, put on your oxygen mask first before helping others. I think there's a part of us that understands it intellectually, but emotionally we don't. And we are going to talk about why is it that we keep ending up at the bottom of our to-do list. But really knowing that we've had this reminder in our lives in lots of different ways, I just want to give tools so that people can put things into action and feel empowered. I really want this to be a time where people know they are not alone. You are not the only one. If you can resonate with what Linda's spoken about, I'm going to share my story later about how I got into such a cycle of self-neglect, but you are not alone. The fact is that I talk to women every day that struggle with caring for everybody else but themselves. And what happens is we end up being overwhelmed, exhausted, and burned out. That's a really difficult place to be creative and make different choices from, right? And so I know I've struggled with this. You've struggled with this. So I just really want to say up front, this class is not about judging and criticizing ourselves for something we haven't done. Instead, it's about choosing to do something different and to be more nurturing. And that really is the energy that I think is the energy of self-nurturing. It's about nurturing and compassion and kindness to ourselves rather than judging ourselves and putting another thing on our to-do list. It's about how we live our lives so that we can show up and really shine our lights brightly in the world.
It's so true. And that's one of the things I love about your teachings and working with you over the years. It's that statement you just made about not judging and criticizing ourselves, because as you know from our conversations, I've done it. And I've hosted you in many Masterclass summits, your column, The Art of Self-Nurturing. You really dive deep into that. And that is such a freeing place to receive your wisdom from of, okay, stop the self-judgment, stop the criticizing, start from where you are. So let's talk about that. Why do women so often find themselves on the bottom of their to-do list?
Well, I think some common reasons are how we've been raised. So how we've been raised in our families and what we've learned in our culture about what it means to be a woman. We really elevate the position of the woman that's always giving and caring for everybody. And we see that as kind of the gold standard, except for it's totally unrealistic. And it leads to us never feeling good enough. Not only are we giving more than we have to give, but then we don't even feel good about doing it. and we end up feeling resentful, or we end up feeling unappreciated. And so I think there's a sense that women are really given so much responsibility, right? We have responsibility with our families. We have responsibility in our work. We have responsibility in our communities. There's such this overwhelming sense of responsibility that I think it's been hard for women to recognize that they are part of that too. So they have a responsibility to themselves. And I think when we start to understand that we have, like, first and foremost, to love and care for ourselves actually allows us to go out and be of service in those ways that we value so much. And I think the other thing, Linda, is that there's this, sometimes we equate with how much we give with how valuable we are. Right? So there's this sense of, we give more and more to reinforce that we're actually enough. And the fact is that we're all enough already. We don't have to do anything to have value and worth. And so sometimes we give too much of ourselves waiting for that to happen. What I found is such a gift of self-nurturing is that the more that we nurture ourselves, the more we value ourselves. And the more we value ourselves, the more we prioritize that time to really deeply care and nurture ourselves. So it's a beautiful self-fulfilling cycle. And that's the thing, that's kind of the magic of taking inspired action. And so it's so great. I just want to thank everybody so much for being on this master call today, because it's an opportunity to do just that, to learn something that you can put into practice and start to feel the benefits of a new relationship with yourself.
It's so true. And before we go to the next slide, Kelley, I want to touch base on that, because one of the things that I hear over and over again in my community, in the Aspire Magazine community, is all women from every walk of life. And the same thing is, they have this feeling of resentment, sometimes really out there, sometimes just underlying, and they don't understand it, which makes them feel even guiltier. And what I say to them is, that's a sign. That's a sign that you've forgotten yourself, that you've become disconnected from yourself. And have you noticed that in the communities that you serve, and in the the keynotes that you do, and the audiences that you serve, that underlying feeling of resentment, they haven't learned yet to see that as a sign that they have crossed over into overwhelm?
Yeah, and I think that feeds in, as you said, to the guilt, right? The guilt of doing it. That can be a negative cycle. I just talked about the positive cycle of nurturing ourselves and feeling better about ourselves, and really understanding our value and worth and knowing ourselves. That's the beautiful thing, right? When you focus on everybody else, Linda, you end up losing sense of who you are and connection with you. And so it's harder to make decisions, and it's harder, you feel really torn a lot of times when you're giving more and more and more of yourself and not coming back home to yourself. And so that can show up as resentment, that can show up as depression, that can show up as, just kind of an under the covers anxiety that's always there for people, because they're running on empty. They just don't have the energy. And so that resentment, yes, we're going to talk about signs, but it's a red flag. If you start feeling resentful, that's a red flag that you've given more than you had to give. And if that's an important relationship or an important place that you want to give it the honor and respect by going and filling up, so you're really giving from a place of authenticity and love versus a place of resentment and anger.
And I've always said, Kelley, and you and I have had this personal conversation many times, that women are the nurturers of the next generation.
Yes, we're modeling all the time. Absolutely.
And I believe, and it's the reason now, especially as a grandmother, that I said, I need to heal this stuff. I have a daughter and a granddaughter, and of course a grandson, but I want to stop this cycle that's been passed down, right? That we put ourselves last, that we beat ourselves to the ground, that we disconnect from our joy. So it's why I wanted to start the year off bringing you to my audience and our collective audiences, because I want to end the cycle, Kelley. I want women to say, yes, I am enough. I deserve self-nurturing. I deserve feeling good about myself and in my own body, spiritually, physically, and emotionally.
Yes, that feels so good. And the fact is that we can. And I think that's the thing I love about this work, Linda, so much. It is so practical. It is not just something that we have to do because I'm a counselor and I've done, counseling with women and people for over 25 years. And there's things, over time that take some time. Self-nurturing, yeah, you got to change your mindset and things, but there's some really practical applications of what we're teaching that people can add in right away. For instance, right now, I invite people to pause and just say in their mind, I am enough. I am enough. And even I am more than enough. And really breathe that in. And maybe check in with their bodies. Where are they feeling that in their body right now? And how can we invite that message in more and more so that our decisions are based on a place of abundance, of enoughness, and not always of scarcity, that we don't have enough. So I have to give more and more and more to prove I am enough. We don't have to do that, Linda.
No, and you don't want to know what just hit me with that sacred process that you just walked us through. We have a tendency, all right, I'll speak for myself. I had a tendency for a long time to say, I don't have time for me. But that process you just walked us through, and you've shared that with me personally in the past and a few other ones, right? It's a moment by moment thing. It took what, 5 to 10 seconds?
Yeah.
And when you taught me that back then, I could do that multiple times a day. Well, that's self-nurturing, folks. That is moment to moment, creating moments. There's no more, get the mindset out, you don't have time. That's the biggest thing Kelley helped me break through. Just, it's a moment by moment thing. You do have time.
Yeah, and everything we're teaching is about self-nurturing. And towards the end, I'm going to give, 3 of my top self-nurturing things that people can put into practice right away that take less than 10 minutes.
I can't wait.
Yeah, I want things to be accessible. I think that's how we make change. Not when we have big, overwhelming things. And quite frankly, most of the people I work with are feeling totally overwhelmed and exhausted. So I'm not going to give, big homework to people that are already in a place where they don't feel like they can take on one more thing. So that's what I want. I want there to be a sense of joy and fun around this practice of self-nurturing, so it doesn't feel heavy and burdensome. It's not another heavy responsibility. It's a joyful responsibility to yourself.
Exactly. Now, Kelley, I know your personal experience of being caught up in a cycle of self-neglect yourself, caring for everyone in life except yourself. But take us back to that moment. Take us back to your journey of, self-neglect.
Yeah, well, and I think this is really important because what I want people to know is I learned this through learned experience. I don't, when I say I'm a self-nurturing expert, it's because I love it and I teach it and I'm out there and I live it every day. It's not because somehow I'm on some higher thing like, oh, I know and others don't. No, it's really, it came from being the parent of a child who had chronic health challenges. My darling, my first daughter, Fiona, she had a epileptic seizure at daycare when she was 2 years old, and they didn't recognize what was going on, and it ended up lasting 55 minutes and she almost died. And it was a very dramatic entry into 20 years of chronic health challenges. And over time I wanted to do whatever I could to support her. And the thing about epilepsy is that there's lots of hospitalizations, there's lots of unknown, it's unpredictable, it comes out of nowhere. And so there was a sense that I lived in crisis management mode all the time. And things progressed, they got worse. She had migraines, there was just a whole number of things. And I found that my whole life ended up being about how I could serve her and not how I could take care of myself in order to serve her. So in doing it over years and years and years and really being in crisis, I felt so much despair and so much hopelessness. And I really got to this place where I was in this crossroads. I remember, and I shared it in a story, Cultivating Joy, that you published, that basically I was standing on a sidewalk and I was so overwhelmed and so depressed and so full of despair. and really feeling like I was not effective, right? I couldn't do anything to stop these unbelievable challenges that my daughter was having, even though I was totally focused on that. And I thought for a moment, oh my gosh, it would be so much easier to step in front of the next passing car than carry this tremendous backpack of grief and overwhelm that I was feeling. And I feel really blessed because just in that moment, I thought, wait, there's got to be an antidote to how I'm feeling. And I really got that the antidote was joy. And so I had done research and all of these things to support my daughter, and I just focused them on myself. I got really good at figuring out, like, okay, how could I bring more joy in my life? And how could I take little bits of time to support and nurture myself? And this quote from Henry Neumann, that joy does not simply happen to us, that we have to choose joy and keep choosing it every day. It just became my mantra. Like, how can I choose joy today? Even I love this little moss heart that I found when I was hiking. Even things like that, I would just like find the smallest thing that would connect me to something that was hopeful, something that opened up energy instead of was so contracted, like all of the feelings I was having. And you know what? It made a difference. It made such an incredible difference in my life. And I got pretty excited about that. Saw it started to make a difference in my daughter's life. She started to feel more hopeful. It didn't change the pain and suffering she was in. It didn't, but it changed her perspective of it. It changed how she held it. It changed how I held my sense of responsibility around it all. And I was able to be more empowering. I was able to be more patient. I was able to be more loving to myself and certainly to all those in my life. And I was a better counselor. You know, I was still counseling and caring for my daughter and doing all these different things. I have great loves and passions in my life. And I felt like I was more connected to me. So when I showed up, I was more loving and connected to others. And it was just so powerful. And it's why I love teaching it, because I started teaching it to my clients. I started running workshops and people were having these tremendous transformations. People were taking new jobs that were more joyful to them. One woman, a huge step for her was to go to the bathroom when she needed to with the door closed. Now that sounds like a very practical and very simple thing, but it changed everything. When she gave herself that time throughout the day just to go to the bathroom without her kids coming in, without people asking things from her at that time, it started to percolate out into the rest of her life. So that's what's really beautiful about this work, is that it has deep ripple effects throughout our lives and our relationships.
I have to say, just hearing your story, and I know so many women can relate, where we have a circumstance in our lives, Kelley, that it's almost like we give our power away because we want to nurture and care for someone, especially in your case with chronic health issues, that we forget ourselves. And I'm happy that you woke up to that fact, because now your message created from that time in your life is now serving and inspiring so many other women on the path through your workshops, your presentations, your keynotes. So when you look back at that time and you now then get a client in front of you, it's like you have this deep sense of empathy and compassion. You know, I know that from our calls together, because you've lived it. You don't just teach it, you live it day to day.
Well, and if anybody reads my blogs, you find I usually write as we. Like, I really don't pull myself like, I am here and you are there. No way. We are in this together, Linda. Oh my gosh. I have to use my tools and practices all the time. I have an aging mother who has a lot of needs of me at this time. So what's really fascinating is things continue to happen in all of our lives. That is just part of change. Change happens. We have grief, we have loss, we have challenging things happen, but having a self-nurturing practice gives me a sense of resilience and a reserve to draw upon when I have another challenging thing that I face. And that's why I love this so much. That's why it's been so life-changing for me, and it's been so life-changing in so many people that I've seen. I'm just really excited just to share more and more and have more people see. And as I said to you before, like I believe that we can transform this world. There could be a healing of this world through each woman that chooses to nurture herself. She's going to bring a whole new energy and a whole new sense of modeling and connection in the world.
So beautifully said. So now that we know the depth of how passionate you are, about how committed you are to transforming the world with this message of self-nurturing, let's dive into what the first step in embracing self-nurturing, what would that be?
So it's really about self-compassion. And I've already said it, right? That the intention that I bring to this work is that instead of judging ourselves for what we haven't done, we really come to ourselves with self-compassion. So there's an importance in this, in opening with self-compassion, with a place, understanding our world from a place of curiosity, of non-judgment, of kindness and compassion. And Kristen Neff, who's really an amazing researcher about and writer about self-compassion, she says that with self-compassion, we give ourselves the same kindness and care that we would give to a good friend. So if we think about how we operate in our lives, so much of the time we're, probably maybe our harshest critic. And shifting this process and starting to come from a place of compassion can change everything. And really, to have any sustainable change, I think it really has to come through self-compassion. It's like resolutions. People give resolutions, and you either did your resolution or you didn't. It's kind of a pass-fail kind of thing. Intentions are more about how you live out your life. And so when we bring self-compassion, when we understand that even the act of, seeing that, I've made a mistake, but I'm not a mistake, shifting in those ways, just that starts, it is the open door. It's like the door opens, and now there's the possibility of nurturing when we come to ourselves and treat ourselves like our own friend.
That's also true. And one of the ways I had to really shift into self-compassion, it was to re-script the thoughts I always had. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So every time I felt something coming up, one of the statements I've used over the last 10 years is, if I felt the self-talk like, you don't have time, who are you to do this? The negative Nelly. I would always say, is that something you would say to your best friend?
Yeah.
Why are you saying it to yourself?
Yeah.
And it would make me pause for the moment. And that's how I started embracing self-compassion, is monitoring my self-talk. Have you noticed that too, is shifting this that runs in the background all the time?
It's so huge, because we actually create more stress in our lives by how we talk to ourselves. So, say you knock over a cup of coffee or something, and you're bummed because now you've got to clean it up, and maybe you're embarrassed because people are around. If you start saying to yourself like, oh, you're so stupid, I can't believe you did that, you're so clumsy, all of a sudden you are at a way more heightened state of stress and anxiety around the whole thing than if you said, oh, well, I guess I wasn't supposed to drink that today, and just clean it up, find some way to have more compassion. Because certainly if somebody else spilled something, you wouldn't yell at them. You wouldn't yell at your friend about that. So using that, I have a friend that if I ever say to her, or she says to me something about herself or myself that's negative, we'll say to each other, hey, don't talk about my best friend that way. And just and that's what I love about how we can be supportive to each other. When I'm really judgmental and critical of myself, Linda, I know that energy is coming out to other people, right? Yeah. So if we have a desire to be a person of kindness and love and service in the world, being kind and loving and being of service to ourselves first is critical, because whatever is percolating in our mind will get projected out on other people eventually. So it's a great act of kindness for the world for us to be kinder. And I really want to ask people, you know, how can you imagine, this would be the time to maybe pause for a moment and just say, what could you imagine that you could do to show yourself more compassion? Is it how you talk to yourself? Is it maybe showing yourself compassion that if your feelings are hurt, you honor that and you notice that instead of pushing them away? Is it that you show yourself compassion when you're tired, you let yourself rest? There's all different ways to show ourselves compassion, and it's a really, really important part. And there's lots of practices around it, but just choosing one thing. You know, today when I make a mistake, I'm going to say, I know I've made a mistake, but I am not a mistake. Just something as simple as that. I use that a lot. That's very helpful to me.
That's a big one, because we label ourselves as a failure if something doesn't go right. And really, I've learned that the circumstance is not who we are, and we're always in control of how we react to the circumstance. As you and I were talking before we jumped on the masterclass with tech issues that were going on for different people yesterday, and how you show up in it. You can't change what's going on, but we always have control of how we show up in it. And that does come back to being kinder and more compassionate with ourselves by watching that self-talk.
Yeah, and just, you know, giving ourselves some grace. I mean, the fact is that we're so, one of the things that's really gotten us, and I think feeds the habit of self-neglect, is our ideal of perfectionism. Perfectionism is totally an illusion. No one's perfect. And quite frankly, you don't learn anything if you don't make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes. It's how we treat ourselves when we do. So if we make a mistake and we say, how can I learn from that? What did I notice about that? What do I notice about myself when I make a mistake? Where do I feel it in my body? How do I, you know, react to that? All of that is nurturing. This is what I love about nurturing. Nurturing is really about the relationship we have with ourselves. So self-care, and a lot of people use the words interchangeably. To me, self-care is more about the acts of doing things. But self-nurturing is about the relationship we have with ourselves. And I was just,
that's okay.
Take myself.
It happens to all of us. All tapping into kindness and self-compassion and giving yourself a moment. Take a drink of water.
Yes, absolutely. And just, you know, I think the other thing about perfectionism is there's such urgency around it. And we can give ourselves a little time to continue to learn and grow. We don't have to be at some place. We need to be where we're at and be authentic in that process. And if we need to pause and take a sip of water because we're coughing, if we need to, whatever we need to do, the compassionate response is listening to ourselves. That's the gift of self-nurturing, is that you have an ongoing way of listening and connecting with yourself.
It's so true. And as you just shared a moment ago, how we talk to ourselves and compassion is the first step in the process of nurturing ourselves.
Yes, indeed. So I think that this quote just wraps that all up. Be careful how you are talking to yourself, because you're listening. And that's the thing. We have tons of thoughts all the time. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we chose the ones that were uplifting, encouraging, and really set us on a path to feel good in our lives?
Yeah,
we can do that. We can do that. And I love that.
So I want to dive into the second way we promised we'd share, which are, what are the emotional and physical signs and symptoms that a woman needs to nurture herself?
Well, have you ever felt like this woman on the screen?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah, so it's like if you've ever wondered if you've given too much, all you have to do really is check in with your body and how you're feeling. We get so much information from our bodies. So if we pause just for a moment and check in. And if you're in a situation like this and your head's down on the table, you know, if that were you, what would be going on? Would your stomach be hurting? Would your head be hurting? What would be some of those signs? Because what I've noticed is when people don't nurture themselves, they end up feeling exhausted. They have more pain in their bodies. They have more tension in their jaws and their shoulders and their necks and their back. They may experience more fatigue and headaches. If they have any kind of health challenge, it usually gets amplified. Maybe they get more sick or have more illness. And then when it comes to emotions, it's like they feel more irritable and overwhelmed and depressed, angry, hopeless, resentful, impatient. It's all of those feelings of, you know, really not feeling very empowered and in control in our lives is when we've just given too much. And instead of judging ourselves or instead of feeling guilty we can't give more, it would be so wonderful to just to pause and see those as red flags. They're just simply, those signs and symptoms are simply red flags that you need to nurture yourself more. So if you start checking in regularly with yourself and taking action when you notice that, you're going to change this trajectory and you don't have to get to a point where you're having a breakdown. I mean, that's the thing that I noticed. I saw when I got to my, you know, crossroads and it was like, oh my gosh, I can't go one more step. I can't take on one more thing. If I'd done some things prior, it wouldn't have gotten so bad. I just didn't know that. Well, that's what I want to share. Let's not have to get to crisis state and be in a crisis management position to make a choice of doing something. Let's start to pay attention to our bodies. And, you know, that's really what I want to ask people now is just to pause, breathe, connect to their own bodies right now, and just ask themselves, what are the signs and symptoms that you've given too much? What's one thing you notice about your body, and maybe one emotional thing that you notice that you can start to bring more awareness to in the coming year?
It's a beautiful reflection question. So I would love everyone to take a moment, just drop down into your body because you already know the answer. So knowing that, how can we begin giving ourselves permission to love and nurture ourselves? And here's the big part, Kelley, without feeling guilty.
Oh, yes, that guilt thing that keeps sliding in. Well, permission is a deeply empowering act. Giving ourselves permission is liberating, it's powerful, and it's profoundly nurturing. And it can be a daily act. You know, you see this slide swinging. When's the last time you gave yourself permission just to have fun? Whatever fun looks like to you. For me, as a kid, I loved to swing. That was so freeing and liberating and joyful and made me laugh. And so giving ourselves permission every day to do something and to recognize you might have to give yourself permission. You may need to write it everywhere. And I have some downloadable things about permission giving. But you may need to give yourself permission. I give myself permission today to be kind to myself and have that on your mirror. You may need to have another permission. I give myself permission today to take 3 deep breaths. And then you put that in your car. I give myself permission to make healthy food choices. Whatever it is that's nurturing that you are wanting to invite more in, giving yourself permission and reminding yourself of how beneficial it is when you give yourself that permission, really, I think, allows us to identify more and more things, more and more ways of opening to living with more peace and more joy in our lives. And permission is the key. We get to give ourselves permission. We don't have to wait for anyone else to give us permission, Linda.
I love the whole idea of permission slips, right? Remember how excited we were as children when we got a permission slip to leave gym or leave school? And imagine writing your own permission slip, ladies, you know?
Yes.
And one of the ways And this picture just made me think of it, Kelley, because I love that photo of you, which is it's the first time I've seen it. For me, it's what can I do today that will bring me joy?
Yes,
And it could
absolutely.
be having an afternoon cup of coffee with silence in the house. Like for me, that like is like, oh, it's that, right? Tapping into joy, which goes back to how we started this conversation. What brings us joy? And do more of that. Give ourselves permission to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I love what you said is permission is a deeply empowering act.
Well, it takes that again, if we want to be empowered women making decisions of our own, we cannot wait for somebody else to give us permission to take care of ourselves because it's not going to happen. Maybe it'll happen by me and you. We're giving them permission today. Maybe a friend will give you permission, but it's way more powerful to make any change coming from ourselves. And giving ourselves permission is an act of self-nurturing. Me saying I'm going to give myself permission to go out and watch the sunset because I find that to be deeply nurturing on mind, body, spirit level, then that energy then flows through the rest. What else do I want to give myself permission around? Maybe I want to give myself permission to speak my truth. Maybe I want to give myself permission to express myself in a new way. I mean, it's another door opener to other things that you may want to do that are nurturing and supportive to you in your life.
I love it. And we talked earlier about the signs and symptoms, right? Of what can happen when we're not nurturing ourselves. What are some of the benefits that we'll discover when we begin nurturing ourselves? And I already have experienced it, and I can tell you this works. And also why it's important, Kelley, to be able to identify the benefits.
Well, I love talking about the benefits because the benefits are the things that feed, that fuel us and help us drain away the guilt and things. And so it's really important to identify because it's the thing that reinforces. One of the first things that nurturing does for us is it improves our health. Most of the time we don't take care of ourselves until we get sick. Does that resonate with people? Does that resonate with you, maybe Linda, from the past? We wait, we give, then we get sick, and then we give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves. And when we nurture ourselves in an ongoing way, it improves our health all over and our mental health. Oh my gosh, so much anxiety and depression is fueled by us giving more than we have to give. So first and foremost, nurturing really improves our health. And what I love to do as I'm working with new clients is have them start to notice what are the areas that you notice are challenged in your life. And as you start nurturing, what do you notice has changed? Because when we notice something has changed, we're more likely to continue doing it. The next thing is that nurturing really allows us to feel more connected. First and foremost to ourselves, Linda, but it also helps us feel connected in our families, in our communities, because we're not running around in that kind of drained out, burned out way. So we can be more present. And when we're more present and connected, we have a sense of belonging. And having a sense of belonging, that's a universal need that we all have. So I feel that nurturing, one of the benefits is a sense of belonging. The next thing I think is that it allows us to shine our light more brightly in the world, have more of a sense of purpose and meaning, and more prosperity, more abundance. An empty lantern provides no light. So you've got to nurture yourself and care for yourself in order to give the fuel that allows you to be your most authentic self on this planet, to show up in a way where you get to be self-expressive and self-protective, and know what boundaries and other things that you need to set in order to take care of yourself. But this sense of purpose, that's the biggest thing that's challenged. There's a Viktor Frankl quote that I really appreciate. And he says, suffering minus meaning equals despair. And I really experienced that when I was going through so many challenges with my daughter. There was this sense that what was the meaning of all this suffering we were going through? As soon as you can and so of course there was a lot of despair and a lot of hopelessness. When you can find some meaning to the suffering that you're going through, it can shift everything. And that's where purpose is really involved. It's hard to do when you're in a burned out state. So you got to take some steps to start to nurture yourself so you can have more of a sense of purpose. And that's what you share in the world. The next thing is that all of your relationships are improved. Your relationships with your family members, your relationships with your colleagues, your relationships in the community, may even be relationships are improved with difficult people in your lives because you're not so reactive. When we're nurturing and caring for ourselves, we don't have to react and get, we call it, pick up the rope for every, thing that's said that is meant to be a button pushed. There's a lot more space and grace around ourselves. And so I've seen all of, relationships improving, including with our sweet pets. Who can be such a wonderful way of nurturing ourselves, is to connect with our beloved pets. The other thing is it allows us to be our own best friend and our own best advocate. We really can show up in a way and create a life that we want when we're connected to ourselves and deeply nurturing ourselves. And I would say that, moving from, being resilient is really important, and then moving to thriving. Nurturing allows us to be in a place where we can really thrive. And, there's a lot of challenges in the world right now, Linda, that people are facing in their own lives and in the nation and in the world. And I feel like the more we're all in a place where we're thriving, the more creative we're going to be about solutions, the more hopeful we're going to be, the more loving and open and compassionate we can be to others that are different than us. And so that's that whole nurturing piece in the world from the inside out that I talk about. It's the ripple effects are quite tremendous when we look at the benefits of this. So I want to invite everybody to kind of pause and breathe. And now just notice, what they think nurturing, how it will benefit them and their loved ones, because that's the key. When we can understand that it does, Linda, we're so much more willing to prioritize taking the time and not feel guilty and selfish. To know that my nurturing actually makes me a better mother. My nurturing myself makes me a better mother. It makes me a better employee. It makes me a better business owner. It makes me a better whatever role I'm playing in my life. Daughter, friend, so teacher, all of those things. So I hope that everybody's found something that they can, grab hold of right now, and then use that as a journaling prompt and use that as a, way of recognizing what impact nurturing has in your life.
And I agree, because for everyone listening, for me, one of the things was I realized that by nurturing myself, I was more patient. And of course, isn't that what I want to be with my loved ones? Those I say I love the most, don't I want to give them? These are the questions I ask myself.
Yeah.
Don't I want to give them the best part of me? Because a lot of times, and I'm going to be really transparent here, we as women put ourselves on the back burner. What happens? We actually give our loved ones the worst of us.
Yeah.
When we're resentful, angry, rushing, impatient. Is that really the intent we have? Of course not. And that's what this whole class is about. So
I would love to give my top 3 ways to nurture yourself.
Let me do a quick recap, because I want to guide everyone. So we promised you today 5 ways, right, to embrace self-nurturing in the new year. We've already covered how to be kinder and more compassionate to yourself and why you deserve it. How to recognize the emotional signs and physical symptoms that you need to nurture yourself. How to give yourself permission to love and nurture yourself without the dang on guilt. And to identify, as Kelley just did, the benefits of nurturing yourself in every aspect of your life. And now we're going to dive into the 5th and final thing that we promised, which is the 3 easy to implement strategies to begin nurturing yourself today. And I know, Kelley, you get all geeked out sharing this.
Well, and actually it's a challenge because I have to limit it to 3 because there's so many wonderful ways to nurture ourselves. But I wanted to share 3 that are universally beneficial to people. And they are the arrival technique that I'm going to teach, connecting with nature, and gratitude practice. So the first one, the arrival technique, is all about arriving and connecting with ourselves. So if people aren't driving or they are in a safe place, I want to invite people to have their feet on the floor and to close their eyes for just a moment and to take a few deep breaths in and out. And bringing a spirit of curiosity and non-judgment, as we do with all mindfulness practices. Just notice how it feels to be sitting where you are. Notice how it feels to breathe in and out. And notice where your palms are resting. And now take your awareness to your body. And as you're breathing in and out, notice if you have any tension or tightness in your body. Notice if you have any pain or discomfort. And notice if there's anywhere you don't have any sensation at all. And on your next exhale, release awareness of your body and come back to your breath with 2 deep cycles of breath in and out. And now bring awareness to your thoughts. And if you could just be a curious observer, not judging anything happening with your thoughts, notice if you can identify any themes. You know, are you having anxious thoughts? Are you having judgmental thoughts? Are you having planning thoughts? What's happening right now in the content of your thoughts? And on your next exhale, release awareness of your thoughts and come back to your breath. Remembering that your breath is an anchor all the time to the present moment, all the time to your body and to yourself. And place your hand on your heart and acknowledge something that you're grateful for about yourself in this moment. Maybe it's that you took this time for yourself and engaged in this masterclass. Maybe it's just a willingness to look at doing something for yourself. Whatever it is, acknowledge something about yourself. And on our last few breaths together, I invite you in your mind as you breathe in to say, I breathe into this moment. And as you exhale, I have arrived. And then I invite you to allow your eyes to float open. So I love this practice. It is a practice I teach everywhere. And because it is short, it's accessible, and it does 3 important things. It connects us to our breath. It helps us pause and reflect on what's happening with our body and really listen. And then to have this ability to view what's going on in our thoughts, because our thoughts are powerful and they can guide us down lots of other paths. So being aware of what's going on in our thoughts, you don't have to chase after. We can notice that our thoughts come in and out all the time. There's a myth about meditation and mindfulness that our minds will just be blank. It's just simply not true. Our minds will create a lot of content. That's what they do. But we can choose how engaged we get with what thoughts and if we chase after them. So that's a really, really important, any kind of mindfulness. Another way to engage with mindfulness, but it's my second self-nurturing practice, is to connect with nature. there is such an ability to be totally present in awe and wonder when we are in nature. Whether we were standing looking at this beautiful, field of sunflowers and the light coming through the clouds, whether you're at the ocean, whether you're at a lake, whether you just walk outside your office and see a beautiful tree and look up and see a bird on a tree. It doesn't matter where you are, it's connecting with nature that's so universally nurturing for all of us. So that would be my second. And then my third is all about cultivating a gratitude practice. And there's lots of ways that we can do this. Gratitude changes everything. We can be anxious, we can be upset, we can be disappointed. And when you can shift it with gratitude, you can put yourself in a position to be responsive versus reactive. So I love this quote: if we do not feel grateful for what we already have, what makes us think we'd be happy with more? And it's true. So really getting into that place where we can find, whether you write 3 things you're grateful for at night before you go to bed. I have a client that just shared with me that she texts 3 blessings from the day before to her best friend in the morning as her morning practice. I do the ABCs of gratitude with my family. We love to do this. So you go all the way through A through Z, and every letter finds something to be grateful for about that. And that's super fun. One thing I haven't talked about is that self-nurturing is not a solo act. It can be a solo act, but there's lots of things that you can do that are nurturing that you can do with your family. And the ABCs of gratitude is a great example of that. So I think gratitude for me, it just allows me to remain grounded in the blessings of my life. And when I'm in that place, I already feel nurtured. I already feel supported. I already feel love when I can be really grounded in that. And I wanted to share one of my favorite quotes from Jean Shinoda Bolen. She says, when you recover or discover something that nourishes your soul and brings you joy, care enough about yourself to make room for it in your life. Isn't that beautiful, Linda?
It goes back to everything we've been talking about. Right?
Yeah. So if you find
joy and appreciating and honoring yourself enough to bring it into your life.
Yeah. So I would love to encourage everybody or invite everybody that's watching this masterclass, choose one of those things and do them for 5 minutes. Whether it's a gratitude practice or intentional breathing or, finding some connection out in nature. Take a walk for 5 minutes. I promise you it'll change your perspective on whatever was happening, and that you'll come back refreshed, renewed, and with a sense of rejuvenation, which is basically what self-nurturing does for us. And so, I hope that there's something in what people have learned that they could put into practice today.
Well, you've shared so much today. We covered all the 5 ways, as well as what you just shared, the 3 strategies that they can incorporate in their life. And I got to say something. It's something I've just found to be true in my life. We follow seeds. Our soul follows seeds. They follow breadcrumbs. And I believe everything happens for a reason. And all of you here with us today followed a breadcrumb, because your soul, your spirit knows, I need help with self-nurturing. If you didn't, you would already be doing it. Now, that was my big awakening 4 years ago when I met Kelley, going, I don't think I need any help with self-nurturing. I got this. Yeah, I'll just read a few things and I've got it. And I realized, oh, Linda, if you had it, you want to be 50, at that time, 54 years old and still struggling with it. And I realized I wanted support. I wanted guidance. And you're here today because you're yearning to feel nurtured in your own life, to feel more joy in your life. And Kelley, you've created something so beautiful for those who want to dive deeper to cultivate a self-nurturing practice. Can you share your special program with us here today?
I would love to. So I created a Transform Your Habit of Self-Neglect 4-week empowerment course. And the reason that I did that was that I wanted to give really practical steps that people could take that were not overwhelming, that could be practices that they explore each week, and that would by the end of the 4 weeks that people would have something that had changed their lives. And so the first week is all about cultivating compassion. And we talked about that, how important it is that that's the first step. The second step is really about developing more self-awareness. There's so many things when we've been caring for everybody and paying attention to everything outside of ourselves that we need to bring back to ourselves. And this is really a time of connecting and understanding ourselves more, recognizing things, and having a week where, you know, we're really focused on developing those skills. The next week is about taking inspired action to nurture yourself. So having some different ways of doing that. And then, you know, reflecting on our growth and deepening our gratitude. I feel that coming from a strengths perspective is always a more positive way to make changes. Instead of saying what we haven't done, what have we done? And what do we feel good about? So each of these each week in the course, it builds upon itself and allows you naturally to transform this habit of self-neglect. So each week, what I love is I send out a love note with the theme of the week. And then in the course materials, everybody gets a meditation, the audio visual lesson, and all these different self-nurturing practices. And they're everything from journaling prompts to yoga. There's other things that I have added in that will support you. So the arrival technique that I taught, you know, you'll get to download that. And for me, it offers an opportunity. The reason that I developed it was really so that people could give themselves the space and time to nurture themselves. And I wanted the whole program to feel nurturing, that they would be easy to implement strategies, that they'd empower people, not overwhelm them. So in the self-nurturing practices, you also get, you know, a mantra and intention, that downloadable I give myself permission to reminder, and more. And then there's also a private Facebook group and that I go to daily to give inspiration and connect to the supportive community and have just ongoing ways to ask questions and receive mentoring. And there's a monthly group coaching call. And I believe, and what I've seen in all the women that have gone through, is that they've learned to cultivate more peace, joy, and meaning in this process. So some of the other bonus things, to give support. I have a 30-day meditation challenge. It's a really lovely ebook that people can put on their phones or tablets in order to do that. And then some other information that I have. And then I love these, and I oftentimes bring these to workshops and other things, but it's a way of using a gratitude journal if you're wanting to have some other ideas, a little downloadable printable card that reminds you to breathe and what you're grateful for, and then my top 5 ways to create peace and joy in your day. So everything about it is really focused on having people embrace themselves and having tools and practices to nurture themselves. And it's fun. And you know what I love also is that you have all this content. So there's no pressure to do everything I've offered in each week. You could do it for 6 months in a row and just go back to the material. So that there's a lot of permission giving in my Transform Your Habit of Self-Neglect e-course.
Well, I'm really excited because 2 reasons. It's time we all need to transform our self-neglect, right? Because this whole conversation has been about, is about being the best we can for our families, for our careers, for every aspects of our life to bring more joy in. And I want to invite everyone to visit transformselfneglect.com to get the details. Kelley, go on and share more of what you feel, because I wanted to talk about one part that I think is really important. I love that you have the private Facebook group and have the monthly group coaching call, because I know how busy your schedule is. You're a sought-after counselor, keynote speaker, and I love that you show up to support your community in integrating all of your teachings into their lives. And this program, Transform Self-Neglect, is the perfect place for the ladies here today to begin.
Well, and you know, we all do better when we have somebody cheering us on and having a sense of support. And what I love about that Facebook group is people will write things that they feel really good about. I gave myself permission today, and everybody cheers them on. And other times people will say, oh, I feel really like I've totally fallen off. I haven't done anything in weeks to care for myself. So it allows for compassion and kindness and love and care, and that we're creating a community, more and more people that are dedicated to caring for themselves but need the support to do so. And so it's really exciting, and I feel very honored and blessed to be able to serve in that way.
And I want to invite everyone again, take a moment, just think about this for a moment. You're here with us today because you're struggling with self-care. Kelley has taken all her expertise, her wisdom to create this e-course that you have access to over and over again. That's the other part I love, Kelley, too, because a lot of us may be on the call, maybe you're in overwhelm, but this isn't overwhelm. This is tapping into the modules and working through them in a way that feels good for you. And that is another, benefit is once they go through the course, it's theirs forever.
Absolutely. And I love that too, because there's times that we want to go back and explore, like, wow, I really, want to deepen around acknowledging myself. I'm going to go back to, week 4 and look at how I can have more practices of recognizing what I've done well and really celebrating myself for that.
Everyone take a deep breath. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you all for having the courage to be here today. Sometimes it's not easy putting time aside, right? In our busy day, our to-do list, but you did it. You put yourself on your to-do list and you are here listening to this masterclass. I invite you to take the next inspired step to get all the details of the Transform Self-Neglect e-course, which you can do at transformselfneglect.com. Give yourself the sacred gift. Make 2019 the year that you put yourself at the top of your to-do list. And Kelley, as always, I love our time together. I love sharing your wisdom with my audience, which is always embraced because you get right down to the core of what they're struggling with. And you do it with such love. So thank you, my beautiful friend.
Oh, thank you, Linda. It's been such a beautiful time together, and I'm deeply grateful for everybody who took the time and prioritized themselves to be a part of this.
Blessings, everyone.